Oh, okay. It says I usually wait for it to say recording in process, but I think because it was already recording now, it's just recording twice. But we're
Okay.
recording now. I'm going to probably edit out that first part, but all
Mhm.
right. So, welcome. Um, I am Chelsea Jewell. I'm here with my really good friend Shawntà, and we're here for one of these conversations for my Patreon page that I'm kind of looping in this bucket of content that's like want to be a podcast, but not really a podcast. But basically, I'm just having some people that I'm close to and love and always have really good conversations with on here so we can just kind of chat and see where the energy goes and trust that I'm sure there's some things we're going to talk about that are applicable, relatable, helpful for whoever's watching this. So, Shawntà, I want you in a minute to introduce yourself, but first I will let everyone know how you and I met. And I mean, you can also share after if you want to add anything, but you and I met 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago in Peru when we went on our first ayahuasca retreat with Althea. And I personally remember this usually happens to me, especially when I'm in groups or small groups. There's usually like one or two people who kind of like stand out even a little bit energetically to me of just like I need to know and befriend that person. And you, right away, I remember even being on the little shuttle from the airport to the
Mhm.
place. I was like, I need to know her. She's going to be like someone in this group that I'm never sure if it means like I'm going to click with them or not. And I always hope I do.
Mhm.
But you were one of those people who stood out to me. And then we both live in Atlanta. So we ended up definitely connecting in Peru, but also after. And we've been good friends since. Shawntà and I voice note all the time back and forth about deep things, spiritual, esoteric, energetic things. And you are one of my favorite, like, fellow deep feelers as a Scorpio that you are, and like very
Mhm.
philosophical type of person that I can just have like
Mhm.
any kind of conversation with. And I know it's going to like end up, even if we start talking about something really random, I know that between you and me, we're going to end up bringing it to someplace deep and meaningful and like
Mhm.
full of insights. So
Yep.
that's my intro to you. Do you want to share a little bit more about like what you do and who you are?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that introduction first and foremost and echo what you said. Like I could tell during that experience that in Peru that we were going to connect post Peru. And I'm like you, I never know, like how that's going to shape out. And I usually don't put too much thought into it either. But I'm so glad that it did. And you are definitely one of my favorite people to like you really give me a perspective on life that I didn't have someone like you in my circle, and now I do, and it just feels so fulfilling. And I'm always thinking to myself, like, I wish other people had a Chelsea in their life, and I even told somebody about you last week and shared your information because I'm always supporting you with referrals as an astrologer, as a gifted intuitive astrologer. So I'm always sharing your information. And like, if you're ever looking to go deeper, check out my friend Chelsea. She's amazing. But yeah, it's been such an incredible time, like getting to know you and having this space of voice noting where I can express myself, like I said, in ways that I didn't know I needed it. And I'm still like learning how much value it brings to me in terms of me deepening my own philosophical, perspectives and wisdom. And we both share a love of writing. And so you really inspire me to, remember that really writing was one of my first loves. And so a little bit about me. Again, my name is Shawntà, originally from Detroit, Michigan, live in Atlanta. And I currently work as a public speaker, keynote speaker, and workshop facilitator, mostly within corporate organizations. But I do work outside of corporate organizations as well. And the message that I speak about is this intersection between belonging, inclusion, connection, and mindfulness and meditation, and really helping people understand how, through embracing mindfulness and meditation as a lifestyle habit, you can deeply enhance your sense of connection to the present moment thereby enhancing your connection to your environment, your physical environment. And in my case, I'm typically speaking to people at work and how they can navigate that experience of disconnection, which we all feel from time to time within our work, whether we're entrepreneurs or have more traditional jobs. How to navigate that bridge of disconnection and connection. It all comes back to the present moment and getting out of that autopilot sort of mentality and into the now. And sometimes even when I'm talking about it, because I'm so immersed in it, it feels cliche, or it feels like people already know this, but it's not. I have to constantly remind myself that it's not, number one. And number two, even though we talk about mindfulness and meditation a lot now compared to say 5 years ago or 10 years ago, we're still at the very, very early cusp of it being something that's integrated into the way that we live. And so I'll continue to talk about it no matter how discomfort or uncomfortable, or even my own thoughts of it being shallow. I'll continue to talk about it because deep inside, spirit is constantly telling me that it is very much important. The message is necessary, and this is the time to deliver it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This is also like why I love talking with you too, because there were like so many things you just said in that little introduction that I'm like, my brain wants to go in like 20
Yeah,
different directions of
yeah,
like, ooh, let's start a thread on that. But I
yeah.
think, um, I resonate with so much of what you said. And this is why we're such good friends and why both of our like pieces and styles of work are so needed right now. Um, I feel that way a lot too, kind of when you get immersed in the world of spirituality or astrology. I feel that way like, oh, I don't need to talk about this as much because everyone knows about it. But like, I follow
Mm,
everyone on Instagram who's talking about this stuff. Whereas, like, I might be one person's kind of key into
mhm,
this world. And you are someone also, like you mentioned, we're both writers, and you mentioned um, supporting me and referring me. And like, I think you and I work really well that way together too, of like, and especially you, like, you're such a great hype person and a hype friend. Like, and you constantly remind me, like, even with you being immersed in this world too, you're like, no, people need to hear this. And I want to reflect that back to you right now too, of like how, how much people need not only like the information and the tools that I feel like, you specifically focus on with mindfulness. And I love the piece of belonging and how it mixes in with work and corporate world, but also like your unique perspective in general
mhm,
people need.
mhm,
And that was one of the main reasons why I wanted you to come on here today, is because I didn't really have a set agenda or topic for us to talk about, but I just know our conversations, and I'm like, whatever
mhm,
we end up talking about, people are going to want to hear what Shawntà has to hear. And I guess
mhm,
one of my starting questions for you, and then we'll just kind of see where it goes, is what's really feeling alive for you at this moment, either about some of the stuff you were just talking about and your work, or just in general in your life and what you're sensing and feeling, and what's kind of like coming up a lot at the moment. And you can kind of
mhm.
go as vulnerable or not vulnerable as you want to go.
Yeah, yeah. What's feeling alive for me? That's a good question. And I'm happy that you asked me that question because the last week or so has felt very heavy for me. And you and I have shared some of the reasons. And I'm happy to share some of that too. But I'll start, kind of general, saying that it's been sort of heavy. So I really do welcome that question, to remind me of what does, bring me alive and what does light me up right now. And what feels alive for me, on this day, today we're recording this on 11/11. So, really just, I woke up this morning feeling really energized at my power. And I did a mushroom ceremony last year. And I remember during the ceremony, the facilitator asked me, she said, like, remember who you are, remember who you are. And I actually have it written in my bathroom. I keep notes to myself, like sticky notes all over the place. And so I have it in my bathroom. Remember who you are, and what it says is master manifester. And so that today in this moment is lighting me up. Just a remembering that all of the heaviness that I've gone through and all of these emotion, the fact that I'm feeling my emotion is very powerful because it's a key ingredient to manifestation. The stronger, I always go by the quote, the stronger the emotion, the stronger the power of the ability to manifest.
Mm.
And so like the last week, well, last Wednesday was my birthday, which
Happy belated
was
birthday.
thank you, which was the day after the election. And I knew going into my birthday that there was a strong possibility that it could be bit heavier than I wanted it to be. Right. And if I'm being honest, I feel like my birthday is always kind of heavy. At least the last few years. It's always felt, like I want it to be like I have these expectations and I want it to be this, and then it turns out to be something else. And then there's like this looming feeling of disappointment. For example, my 40th birthday, I had a big party. I was dating this guy at the time. And I remember like months before my birthday, I knew I wanted to go into my birthday party with a date. Like I wanted to have a date to my birthday party.
Mhm.
And so me being the master manifester, I did. I manifested this guy and we met in like July or August. So just a couple, just enough months in between my birthday being in November for us to cultivate a relationship and a connection to where I felt comfortable sharing him in prime time in my life, at my party. And I was all excited. I'm like, I've manifested this guy. It's going well, and he was my date. He was a great date. But during my party, he got like sloppy drunk. Like he got super, super drunk and it was a little embarrassing. It was I had to like drive us back because we got a hotel. The party was like way out in Conyers, Georgia, so like 30 minutes away from where I live. And so we had a hotel room that night. I had to drive us back to the hotel because he couldn't even drive. And I didn't like the gift that he gave me. Like it was my 40th birthday, and I felt like the gift, in my opinion, it wasn't grand enough. It was in my head at that time, that's how I saw it, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so like all of those experience ended up putting like this cloud, like over my birthday, and we had to have these uncomfortable conversations and blah blah blah. So that's just an example of how like that energy can show up for me. And this year it showed up again, just this feeling of like feeling like I'm not where I want to be, in terms of my some of the areas of my personal life, my romantic life, feeling like there's things missing, feeling like people don't celebrate me, just kind of getting into that victim mentality. And then it being the day after the election, of course, because the election did not go the way that I wanted it to. And the majority of the people in my circle, it also did not go the way that they wanted it to. So every time somebody called to wish me a happy birthday, it was happy birthday. So about this election, oh my God, Trump, this. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, I don't want my birthday to be about him.
Yeah.
Like,
Ugh.
maybe I'm being selfish, but whatever. So that plus like this heaviness, like people in my family that are sick. I had a young cousin that was in a coma after having an asthma attack. I have people that are close to me in my life that are having mental health challenges right now. It was just a lot of real shit. And so this weekend ended up being, a lot of, just sitting in that, right? Like really sitting in that, not emotionally bypassing, something you taught me, if I'm being honest. And just choosing to feel it, and choosing to find ways to navigate through it, right? Like wherever that through leads me. Maybe it's out of it, maybe it's into reflection, like wherever that through was. Um, and this morning, because I think I spent that time really like sitting with it, calling on true spiritual community and tribe, being reminded that I do have tribe that can support me, and that can uplift me during those times. I don't have to be the one always holding space for others. I do have people in my life that are qualified to hold space for me. So today, even though I woke up, feeling a little disoriented by, some of the weekend's events, eventually, slowly but surely, I got to a place of, oh yeah, I forgot. Like emotion, it's here. Today's 11/11. Today's the day that I will sit down and really continue to lay the foundation of my dream life. And even though it's heavy right now, it feels good to know that it's not heavy just for me. I've talked to so many people and they're all like, Jesus Christ, and so I know they're not doing what I'm doing, right? Like I've sent some emails that I know is going to transition into great income. I've had soul conversations with friends that I know is going to continue to spark enlightenment. And so I just feel lit up at the fact that I truly can manifest the life of my dreams through my emotion by sitting with emotion and doing the things that I teach others to do and the things that I haven't taught people to do yet that are just being led by spirit to help me navigate this particular day and this particular moment.
Yeah, wow. Man, and it is so interesting that we are meeting on 11/11 and we're having this conversation on 11/11, which is, of course, just like a big, powerful portal of energy to use. I want to kind of like touch on a couple of things you said. One, like the heaviness, and also for me, especially in the last week or so, it's been heavy and lots of emotions. And there's been like a fogginess. And I'm feeling that today as well. Like it's actually foggy outside in Atlanta. And when
Mhm.
I like wrote my email newsletter for the month of November, I was feeling into the energy and I was like, I know it's significant in some ways. Like we have the election, Pluto's going to move into Aquarius for the last time in our lifetimes. But like it feels really foggy and unclear and uncertain. And that to me kind of has gone hand in hand with the heaviness as well. But to your point, I have also, while I've been feeling that as well, like you said, I know I'm not alone in it. And that I think that is probably the thing that can keep me stuck in the heaviness the longest is thinking that I'm the only one and thinking that, like, if I'm just, stuck in a social media spiral, seeing everyone's like glamorized
Mhm.
lives and like
Mhm.
best highlight reels, I'm like, oh, I guess this is just me. So I guess I better like, it just adds this whole layer of shame and guilt to it of like, that actually is what causes me to bypass my emotions more because then I like feel this pressure to turn it around and go into toxic positivity and be like, well, everyone else is doing fine. So it must just be me. So
Mhm.
I better like get out of this and snap out of it. But like, I also, the sitting with the heaviness and in the feelings is what I love what you said as well when it comes to manifestation and like using the energy of it. Like there's so much power in emotions, even if they're not fun ones to be in.
Right.
But you can like, instead of bypassing that and bypassing the power that they hold to build your dream life, you can actually use it almost as fuel. And I'm curious,
Yes.
like, what exactly is there a process you do for that, or like how do you see that kind of happening? Like how does that work really? Because i
Yeah.
i know, and you're right, and I'm like, how does that work? Why does that work?
Yeah. So you might laugh at this. I treat it like a hack, right?
Yeah,
And
it
I don't
feels kind of
always
like a
remember
hack.
it. Yeah, it totally is a hack. But it requires you to be conscious and aware of where you are. Meaning like I don't always remember to do this. And it's not like, okay, every time I feel emotion, then I do this. But oftentimes when I feel emotion, I do this. And what I mean is like I'll notice that I'm in and that I'm feeling this heavy emotion. What that means for me is, or what that looks like for me is I'm crying, I'm overthinking, I'm uh angry, worried, upset, frustrated, like something may have happened in my life to trigger, this event. Or it could have been something that happened in the past and it's just something, something's regurgitating, these thoughts and these feelings. Um, and and so then I notice it like, okay, ooh, the emotion is so heavy that I'm crying right now. The emotion is so heavy that I'm choosing to just, especially if I'm alone in my home, I'll just start speaking how I feel out loud with a lot of passion, almost as if I'm like, saying the things that I want to say to the person that upset me or saying things to God, to help me, like summoning my angels and my spirit guides, whatever I'm saying. I think they're called incantations, is one word that
Mm,
I kind of think of in this moment, meaning like I'm embodying everything. Like I'm not just
yeah.
speaking. I'm not speaking like I'm speaking right now. I'm standing up. I'm in my living room, which is to the right of me, and I am. crying, I'm speaking loud. Sometimes I'm moving my body and I'm like, putting my hands, like I'm using my whole body to express like how I feel in this moment. And there's no script, there's no camera, this is not for social media. Like it's just for me in that moment. And usually what happens is, and I'm so used to doing that is that it just kind of happens intuitively. Um, then it's like, ooh, strong emotion. Now let's go from we've said how we felt. We've expressed like how we feel in this moment. Now with that same energy, let's express how we want to feel.
Mhm.
Right? Like let's express what we want out of life. Like what is it about this experience that is a reversal or a conversion? And it's sort of like I have a framework that I use that I teach with, and it's called Catch, Convert, Create, which stands for catching the thoughts and the feelings that don't serve you, converting those to your truth or to your desire, to what you want to manifest, and then creating or embodying, living life, taking action with that new energy. And so it's sort of it's my way of doing that. And sometimes it's visualization. Like sometimes I'll be moved to like actually just sit down and pull up my favorite, visualization script, or YouTube video that guides me through a visualization, and just seeing what I want in the moment, seeing a different perspective. I mean, sometimes that's all it is. Just,
Mhm.
spirit, God, help me see a different perspective because there is always a different perspective. That's the thing that we have to realize when we're in these moments of feeling stuck or angry or frustrated. There is always a different perspective that we can take. Doesn't mean that it has to be positive. It doesn't mean that it has to be, something that lifts you out of the current mood, but there is a different perspective. And then I just take an action that is a reflection of that, and again, it happens intuitively. It could be for me, you know, like knowing the friend to call that will help ground, that conversation, ground that experience into my life. It could be journaling, like, like literally just journaling out, what it is that I want in that moment. But it is, whatever it is a reflection of the shift, right? And it could be momentary. That's like something I want to like remind people that are watching this. What I'm describing is not something that I do this and now miraculously I'm better and I'm fine and I'm happy and my mood is great. It doesn't work like that. It's just in that moment, I know the power that I have, right? And it's very,
Mhm.
very powerful energy. And so I'm just going to real quick channel it, alchemize it, change it, put all that energy towards what I want. And the hypothesis is that it will translate into something big. And I've been doing this for years and my life is completely shifted. I'm a year into being a solo entrepreneur, or rather full-time entrepreneur. And I've exceeded my financial goals and I've met incredible romantic partners this year that while they're not behaving so well right now, it has been, up leveled experiences and like lessons and all those things. So the dreams are coming true. Like they're
Yeah.
coming true right now. So it's like if they came true before, they'll come true in in the future. And the last thing I'll say, I did this really powerful practice yesterday. And it reminded me of you because it reminded me in our Peru ceremony. Do you remember the last day of our ceremony, where after the ceremony was over, we had like a dance party,
Uh-huh.
right? And we were listening to, it wasn't really spiritual music. It was like R&B. Who people would just call out a song and
Uh-huh.
we play it, and we were just dancing and frolicking and having so much fun. But I stressed that it wasn't like heavy spiritual music, like flutes and gongs and
Yeah.
sound baths. It was just music that we listened to all the time, but it was all very positive music. And so I put on this Marvin Gaye song. It's called Got to Give It Up. And there's an 11-minute version of it. And so I put it on yesterday when I was like feeling really, really low. And I just went in my mirror and I just started moving my body. Like, and I immediately got like mentally transferred back to our Peru ceremony. And I was like, oh, that's the event. Like, remember, this is the event you want to
Mm.
curate, this ecstatic dance event that is reminiscent of our experience in Peru. And so again, I'm having this powerful energy and I'm imagining my dreams. I'm imagining this event, I'm imagining all the people it's going to serve. I'm imagining my love life. I'm like just seeing all these things. And again, knowing that it will come true because I
Yeah.
did it in accordance to like sort of the scientific method behind it all.
And in alignment with like your soul and with what
Yeah.
spirit's prompting in you. Um,
Yep.
well, I love that whole, I'm like, this is so cool. I wasn't planning on having a manifestation masterclass with Shawntà, but I love too, like, I, I don't know, I hear, like, of course, whenever people talk about manifestation and law of attraction type of stuff these days, I feel like people talk about feeling in terms of like really letting the feeling of what you want come in. But there's also this whole, and they talk about perspective shifts of like shifting, like you
Mhm.
said, where you are now. But not a ton of people talk about and address like really embodying and accepting. Those were the two words that were really coming up when you were
Mhm.
talking for me, is like you're embodying the emotion of where you are now and you're accepting it, and like almost using that as a portal back into deeper connection with yourself, with the present moment, with spirit, and what you ultimately want, as opposed to the more like kind of traditional way we're taught to manifest, or most people teach it these days, which is very kind of bypassy of like, yes, focus on the feeling, but only the happy feelings and only the happy perspectives. Like you, if
Mhm.
you feel anger, you're going to attract more anger. If you feel sadness, you're going to attract more sadness. And people are like, well, I don't want that, so I better not feel those things. And what
Yeah.
you're saying is like, no, I like not only go into them, but fully embody and express them. And actually, what I was thinking of too when you were talking about that in your process of like, I love the like talking out loud to yourself or to the room and the incantation.
Mhm.
I started
Mhm.
reading this book yesterday, and actually, I thought of you, and I almost messaged you, and I'm sure I will. Well, I'm telling you about it now, but like I was like, me and Shawntà are going to do some sort of event around this at some point. But it
Yeah.
was it was called, I forget what the book is called, but it's basically about somatic art therapy, where it's embodiment and expression. And the first part
Mhm.
of the book is just about why that works. And it's connecting like somatic therapy of like the body knows, and expression, because it's like the somatic part is like going inward to like feel and find what's there. The expression part is like expressing it, bringing it outward. And so it's actually creating something, not for the sake of like being a great artist necessarily, but for the sake of
Mhm.
expressing what's in you. And also in that, there's really deep healing that just talking about things can't always necessarily reach, because like our cognitive minds can't necessarily always put words to really deep complex emotions. And so when we can
Mhm.
like let ourselves feel it and then express it through um speaking, acting was one of the things, like painting, dancing, creative
Yep.
writing, like any of these kind of more right brain type things, it's
Mhm.
healing and powerful. And like you're adding on to it too, like that is the juice, that is the fuel for being a capital C creator, a capital M manifester. Um, and like that's actually how you get to a more grounded perspective shift, is like going
Right.
into and through the depths. That's
Right.
such a Scorpio thing too, which I love.
Right. And I can't believe you just said somatic expression because I mean, you didn't know this, but I went down a rabbit hole yesterday on the word somatic. And even Friday, I attended this beautiful like healers. It's like kind of like community for healers. So like healing for the healers circle. And one of the ladies there was a somatic or is a somatic a therapist that specializes in somatic therapy and trauma treatment. And so I've been fascinated by that word somatic for like a large part of this year. So when she said that, I was like, tell me more, right? You know, and she gave me this little, you know, kind of master class on what that means to her. And I went on this rabbit hole yesterday on YouTube around like somatic practices. I saved all these different like yoga practices that I thought would be interesting. I did a portion of a somatic yoga practice last night. And even this morning, I recorded a short Instagram reel where I used the word somatic so it feels very, very much aligned that you and I are talking about this because you're right. It's the thing that I think people, I'm hoping that we are sort of continuing to grow in our understanding of manifestation and law of attraction and and how to like facilitate these things. Because there's levels to it, right? Like there's levels
Mhm.
to it that I haven't reached, and there's levels to it that you haven't reached, and so on and so forth. And it's not like one is better than the other, or I don't see it like that. But I think that when people start to really understand the power of embodiment, they will start to really transform their lives. And I think the reason this came up for me during my practice, and I wrote it down, and I'm gonna have to grab the notebook at some point, because what I said was I want to create a space where people feel like comfortable and like feel where people feel like really comfortable being weird.
Yeah.
Right. Like being, because that's the thing with movement, right? And when, what we're talking about, somatic art expression, this stuff for most people feels weird. Like it feels weird to be, dancing in these like kind of not like just the way your body is actually asking you to move. It may not be on rhythm. It may not be the best dance moves. It may look kind of crazy to other people. Or maybe you don't feel like moving at all. Like you just want to stand there, right? And you're, and stand there and just stand, right? Standing meditation is a thing too. And that feels weird. And so I had this thought that when we create spaces where people feel safe being in their natural skin, and moving the way that they choose to move, um, then they're learning that it's okay. Like they're literally rewiring the part of the brain
Mhm.
that used to equal this type of movement equals weird. So therefore attach shame, attach embarrassment, attach all these other words to it. You're creating new neural paths in your brain and rewiring the belief to where it's no longer weird because I just did it. I just proved to the brain and to my body
Mhm.
that I did it. Nobody laughed at me because in this type of setting, we would set those ground rules. We would
Mhm.
say, like, hey, there's no making fun of people. This is a space for you to embrace your own weirdo nature. And you're safe to do that. And so now that you have sort of rewired the brain in that moment to no longer see this thing as weird, maybe my hope is that you'll do it more. Like you'll do when you go to a party, right? And normally you're the one standing in this, standing back and just observing everyone, and you'll actually get out on the dance floor and move your body, which can be sacred, right? It's just sacred in the act of releasing energy. That's what parties and movement is for. It's nothing else. It's just to release energy. If you're at a yoga class, or you feel uncomfortable going to a yoga class because you're afraid that people are going to judge you and the way you move your body, maybe doing a session like this, you won't feel as afraid and you'll actually go to that class, you'll do that thing. You're like, I just feel like there's so much fear around
Mhm.
like our natural existence. Like it's
Mhm.
the strangest thing ever. Like even when you're having like just regular conversations with people, and people will say to me like, "Oh, why'd you say that?" or "Why'd you say it like that?" or "Why are you doing that?" And sometimes my response wants to be, "Can I just be in my natural existence right now?
Mhm.
Like, can that just be enough? Like, does it have to be the way you need it to be? Can it just be the
Yeah.
way it is right now?" Right? Like we need more spaces where we can cultivate that.
I can't wait for you to create something like that. And
We're gonna do it
it's
together. We
yeah,
claiming it
and we'll
because I
we'll
need
mix
help.
in okay, I'm there with you. And it it makes me think of a couple of things. One is like, God, there's so much. I mean, not even just talking about suppressed emotions, but just suppressed energy and urging. Like we have truly forgotten how to listen to our innate system. When I at the beginning of last year, 2023, I taught an intuition class that I want to teach again in some way in the future, but this was like the biggest thing that I noticed and continue to notice is that when people are trying to get reconnected with their intuition, and everyone wants to like learn to read the akashic records and like learn to read
Mhm.
energy and channel messages, and that's all great, but it's like we can't even get there while we're still like suppressing our most natural instincts and urges. And it also like starts so early, like in school we are all expected to sit, and if you are like fidgety, if you have to go to the
Yep.
bathroom at a different time than someone else, like you have to like conform, and we're taught to like shut down these neural pathways that are telling us like I need to move like this, I need to doodle, that helps
Mhm.
me focus, or I need to do
Mhm.
whatever. And so yeah, like what you're talking about is so it's like not even just about the thing that you do, it's about the way of being that's like
Right.
deeply present. Going back, this is why it makes so much sense
Hmm.
for you. It's so tied to mindfulness, like being deeply present
Hmm.
and listening to and honoring like whatever's coming up in us. And the second thing I thought of was this is really like one of the gifts that ayahuasca gave me. I remember being in Peru and having, there were lots of different themes that I went through in my uh, sessions, but one of them, I remember different moments of feeling exactly that, like the no inhibition of like, I need to move like this. I got this energy. I need to. And there was that moment in that second ceremony when our favorite moment when this
I
is
already know
like,
what you're gonna say.
I know it's like my one of my favorite stories, and like I feel like this is when our bond was really solidified. But
Absolutely.
I'll share it here real quick, but because it ties into this. But there was a moment in the
Hmm.
second ceremony where I had been working all night on kind of tending to almost like some inner child work. Like I was tending to actually my fear energy that was in me, but I was learning to treat it like a child and nursing it back to health. And so I was really focused on like being a really like kind of fun, loving parent to like these little parts of myself. And there was this moment when Colin, our main medicine man, started playing this song on the guitar, and me, Shawntà, and Dorian, is that his name?
Hmm.
God,
Yep,
I haven't
Dorian.
talked to him in forever. All went up and sat in front of Colin like we were like little kids at a concert, just
Yeah,
like, oh my
yeah.
God, like just listening. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we looked like to this one song. And then I remember feeling like when Colin stopped playing the song, I think you and Dorian both got up and went to your place. And the like little kids in me were like, okay, we need to go back to the mat now, back to the other side of the Maloka. But I don't really want to get up and walk over there. I kind of just want to take the simplest, funnest way. So I want to roll like a log to get over there. And so I did. And that was one of those things that, like, I would never have done that. It's so silly. It's so weird. It's so like, is she just trying to get attention? Like, those are all some of the
Hmm.
mechanisms that would shut me down normally. But I did it. And we laughed so hard at that moment because it was so random, but it was so fun and so connective that like we just needed a moment of levity. I don't know. It was such a great moment, but it was for me like one of those moments and almost like a rewiring of that neural pathway of like,
Hmm.
just
Yep.
do what you do. Like, who
Just do what you
cares?
feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to add a little more onto that story because I love telling stories. And from what I remember, and of course this was we were heavy in the medicine, but what I remember, some things that stood out, because one, I'm the oldest between you and Dorian. So from what I recall, I went to the altar first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Colin was playing the song, and I went to the altar, and then you came to the altar, and then Dorian came to the altar. And we were just sitting there, just sitting there, like you said, like observing, I just remember it was like he was glowing and
Yeah.
like the guitar and like, oh, it was just such a moment. And then, like you said, the song ended and you decided to roll like a log back to your seat. And my response was, is this girl rolling? Did she
Yeah.
just roll? And actually, I'll be honest, I used the N word
No, I remember that
because
too. I wasn't
it
gonna
was
say that, but
so
yeah.
it was so inappropriate. Like, I mean, like I'm having like feelings, if I'm being honest, I'm having feelings of like weirdness right now, but whatever. But it was like, did this N-word just roll? And then I don't know who started the laughter first, but we all just burst out
Yeah.
into laughter. And I remember when I said it, it was kind of like, ooh, because it was
And then
so
right
natural.
after you said that, Dorian goes, roll on,
Roll
girl.
on, girl. He said, roll on, girl. And we were laughing hysterically. And not only were the three of us laughing, because you have like if you could imagine, just to set the scene for those watching this, we're in this maloka, which is like this round, we're all like kind of sitting in a circle, um, with Colin at the center. And And so like me and Dorian, we're laughing. The whole room, it was like ricochet, like one by one, everyone starts laughing. And it was heavy. Like, this
Yeah.
was not a moment where we were like laughing. Like everyone was like going through, some people are throwing up, some people are crying, some
Yep.
people are like, it's heavy. Right. And so like one by one, everybody started laughing. And I look at Colin and even he's laughing. He's like this. He's like, because he doesn't want to laugh. Like even he kind of broke, like broke characters, so to speak. Like when you're in a movie and the actor kind of
Uh-huh.
breaks scene with laughing. And then it became a bit disruptive because like everybody's laughing, and so Althea had to come, and I'm like, "Look," like just like ridiculous, obnoxious laughter. And Althea just slowly came, and she's like, "Okay, let's go put you back to your seat." She like, and I think I said to her, "Oh, I'm in trouble." Like, okay, that's fine. I'll accept that I'm in trouble. That's okay. But I think I wanted to just share like those parts because one,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, even just saying that it's a reminder that it doesn't have to be so heavy all the time. Like, it just doesn't. Like, even during these deep spiritual transformations and shifting from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius and a new president that many of us don't want to be president and people being sick and people letting us down and all these things. Like, I just always choose to find the humor in everything. And Chelsea knows this, I'm like a closeted comedian. Like, I love comedy. I've done stand-up comedy once. I'm always trying to bring more humor into like my speaking and the way I teach and testing and learning with that. Because I truly believe in the transformative and healing power of humor. And I know for a fact that that moment, that we all co-created completely shifted the energy in, I
Hmm.
think, a healthy way, and thank God that we have our leaders like Althea who can, like kind of bring the space where it needs to be. But I was so thankful that she allowed that,
Yeah.
right? That her and the other leaders, that they allowed those moments, those couple minutes, however long it lasted, of levity, and of just lightness, because, the journey doesn't have to be. It just is not. It's not always sad. Like even in the best humor comes from dark places. And
Hmm.
so like I think for us to kind of remember that collectively, that if you can figure out a way to like bring humor and then physically laugh, again, incantation. Now you're embodying,
Yeah.
you're not just thinking emotion, you're bringing it to your physical form, and that matters. That matters from the neural pathway perspective as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And what else I love about that, at least from my perspective in that moment, is I can often I'm an intense person. I'm a Scorpio rising, and I can often want something so badly, or my resistance to something can be so strong that like sometimes I almost feel like my manifestation process I have to like reverse psychology myself, because like if I in that moment had been trying to like lighten the energy and been like, what can
Mm-hmm.
I do to make this fun and funny and blah 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 for everyone and not just like for the inner children in me,
Hmm.
it it wouldn't have been authentic, and people can feel that too.
Exactly.
And I love too that you acknowledge that it actually was really heavy in the Maloka, like for a lot of people leading up to that, because when you said that, that brought me back to where we are now collectively and how heavy it feels for so much of us. And like there's something about that, and like the parallel there of just like, even if you can't, or it's you're not trying to lighten the moment or find the levity right now, like just trust that this is where we are for whatever reason,
Right.
individually and collectively. And like who if we're all if more and more of us, I think, are just following our authenticity, our intuition, our urges, our weirdness, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
who knows what could come of that. It could be like a really authentic random moment like that that ends up creating exactly what we wanted and needed without trying.
Yeah. I think the language that comes to mind is something you told me in my year ahead reading. Chelsea, for those that know, she has an amazing product, the year ahead reading. Support her. She'll give you your specific astrological kind of reading for the year. I've done it twice with her. It's super helpful for me. But language that you have given me around that is being a conscious performer, right?
Mhm.
Like and that's the thought that comes to mind, in that you're you're not trying to do anything. You're just being, right?
Hmm.
You're just being the light that you are. And for some of us, performance, and I mean, you're a Leo. So, I mean,
Hmm.
I want you to kind of talk. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about what that phrase means to you, conscious performer, being a Leo. But like what you told me, because it was in relation to Leo, like kind of the more healthy aspects of Leo, is that it's really like embodying the truth, which for some of us, it is performance. It is not performance in that you're being inauthentic, right? Or
Hmm.
performative in that sort of negative connotation kind of way. Performance in that life is a stage, right? Life is a stage. We are all the director, the writer, the star, the like we fulfill these different roles in our own individual play in our life, and sometimes it requires us to really stand out, to step up and stand out, and to be a leader, and to have a voice, and to share some of these gifts that we do consider in this world to be more performance based, whether that's writing, whether it's singing, whether it's dancing, whether it's humor, whether it's speaking, like all these different gifts, and each of us has something, right? Like each of us has something that we can be, a strong conscious performer in, and not trying to manipulate, not trying to get attention, not trying to do any of these more shadow aspects of it, just being, and knowing
Hmm.
that those that need to see it will see it, and it will spark something. So I'm gonna stop there because I would love to hear your perspective on that, given
Yeah.
your Leo, sort of way of being.
Yeah, I know. It's such a, and it's funny because my Leo sun squares my Scorpio ascendant. So the Scorpio wants to be like deep, intense, brooding,
Yeah.
private all the time. But my Leo nature wants to be kind of like that and out in the open and expressive. The word that was coming to me, well, a couple of things that were coming to me when you were talking about that conscious performer aspect or conscious performance aspect is like, it comes down to the intention where like, yeah, if your intention is to get attention or like to be seen in
Hmm.
a certain way or to like have people like you and not ruffle any feathers, like you're gonna, whether you mean to or not, I think end up in more of that unconscious performance and
Hmm.
inauthenticity. um but the word that was coming up as an alternative was again embodiment, like what you're talking about and even what you were talking about with your kind of manifestation hack and what you went through this weekend, like what you're doing in those moments is embodying emotional energies and expression, and by like giving them space and letting them move through you, like that's your truth in that moment, and you can totally like lean into that and amp it up, like to kind of lean into the aspects of like,
Hmm.
I'm angry, I'm gonna like punch this pillow and I'm gonna
Hmm.
scream into it and blah blah blah, like
Yep.
that to me feels like conscious performance that actually gets you in touch more deeply with yourself and
Yes.
what's moving through you. What do you feel about
Yeah.
that?
I love that, especially because, like, in my environment, right? Like, just to provide a little perspective, originally from Detroit, um, live in Atlanta. I went to a historically Black college, so my entire life has been in predominantly Black spaces. And oftentimes, as a Black person in America, in order to survive, in many cases, you are sort of taught consciously and subconsciously to be seen and not heard, and that anything that puts you in a spotlight that's outside of like your career, but even in your career, right, you
Mm-hmm.
can't ruffle feathers, you don't want to disrupt or make other people uncomfortable, right? Because there was a time that as a Black person, to make someone else uncomfortable could literally end in death, right? And to this day, it could
Mm-hmm.
still, right? Police brutality and all these other things that happen in this world. And in addition to that, for most of us, most of the time, we're safe. We're literally safe to be our authentic selves. And I think because so many people, and it's not just Black people, of course, I've taught classes on this topic and to many demographics. And I always ask this question in one of my sessions, and around this idea of being seen, not heard, like how is that relevant to you? And cross demographic, cross age, cross race, cross gender, everyone always raises their hand. I'm just, kind of explaining where it comes from a Black person's perspective. So I say all that to say, like, for most of us, the issue isn't like being too much, right? Like I think for many of us, the issue is not being enough. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
it's we're all too quiet. Like, yeah, you have those people that, and we all know those people that showboat and that are definitely in an energy of just seeking attention and one-upping, right? One-upping others. We've all seen that before, but and that needs to be addressed. I think a bigger, or I think in addition to that, and perhaps one could argue a bigger issue is the fact that too many of us, especially people that identify in diverse groups, whether you're a person of color, a woman, LGBTQ, like whatever it is, many of us don't feel safe being seen
Mm-hmm.
because we've been told that our presence is a threat. And so, what we all collectively have to do, and what I do, you asked me about manifestation. Another thing is like, I always say, whatever you're not so good at or whatever you feel uncomfortable doing, you have to practice it. You have to find moments in life where you can practice it, because that's how you get better at things, is to practice, like quite literally. So, for those of us that feel discomfort in being seen, sometimes it's good to just have spaces where you can practice that. That's why going to this ecstatic somatic art expression event that Chelsea and
Ecstatic
I are going to
somatic. I
co-create.
love that.
Ecstatic somatic, right? I feel like a rapper now. I think we need to bring in Althea. We need, yeah, it's all coming
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
Um, but whatever this experience that will co-create, create, whatever, the gift of it is that it gives people permission to feel seen. Like this is a space where you can be seen in your weirdness, your boldness,
Mm-hmm.
your loudness, your too muchness, your like all these different things that psychologically we just hear these stories replaying in our head. We need spaces where we can practice because I mean, let's be honest, like you can't just do that everywhere. Right? I mean, you can, and we have people that do that. Like we have
One
people
day.
that like kind of,
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
my
yeah,
vision of
yeah,
New Earth is like the
yeah.
Earth is like that
It's
space.
right, right, right. Like, and but like where we are right now, right?
Yeah.
Like would I go to a client meeting and just start rolling on the floor? Probably not. Or just break out into an ecstatic dance experience? Like probably not. Like you have to judge the room, read the room, all those things. But at the same time, um, so because you can't do it everywhere, right? It doesn't make sense to do it everywhere. This is why we need spaces where we can feel safe to do it. And the more spaces we have, the more people will practice it. The more people practice it, the more they'll embody it in their life. The more they embody it in their life, then they'll start making decisions that are conscious and not unconscious. And then they'll start actually doing things that change the world. And then suddenly we have the new earth.
Damn. Okay, there we go. That's the
Simple
pathway.
recipe. That's
Well,
it. That's
actually,
it.
one thing I just want to touch on in that was coming up for me, because this has been a really big thing that's been coming up for me in the past week, is this feeling of safety versus not
Hmm.
feeling safe. And
Yeah.
one thing I've had, especially since the election, I've felt, and I know a lot of people feel this as well, like a lot of feelings of not feeling safe in this world.
Mhm.
Like not just like, oh, it's a perspective shift, get over it. Like my body literally has been
Yeah.
kind of in shutdown and a functional freeze in a lot of moments. And one thing I've started to notice as I've kind of been processing over the past week, and that's also in general, it's not just the election, to be honest, but there's like a
Mhm.
whole
Yeah.
environment of distrust in the world right
Yeah.
now. And I feel like
Oh yeah.
it doesn't feel safe. One thing I have noticed, though, that I am proud of, and I think this is a foundational thing to what we're talking about too, like the embodiment and expression and authenticity and new earth, is building the tools that you like, building internal safety. Like I have actually noticed, and I
Mhm.
feel very proud of myself, that something that feels different for me than in 2016 when I also went into a spiral when Trump was
Mhm.
elected. I feel like I have more capacity and more ability to source a sense of safety in myself, even when the world around me
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily feel
That's it.
certain or safe. And
Hmm.
I think that's a big part of the work. And what you're talking about with this type of event, ecstatic somatic type of event, is like we all need tools and relationships and community to help us build that in ourselves as well and prove that it is possible, and to kind of build up that capacity to feel safe in ourselves even if things are going on around us. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's also one of the things I've noticed in some people, including you, that I've talked to in the last week since the election, is the people who seem to be doing okay and kind of able to transition and focus on like, okay, this is my work. I'm going to keep doing my work and like, I'm going to deal with my emotions and process it, but like we're moving forward. There's been that strong sense of internal safety of like,
Yeah.
I know how to like take care of myself. I've got myself. I don't know. Does that bring up anything for you?
Oh God, yes. I mean that literally is the reason that one of the many reasons that I chose to create a platform around mindfulness and meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Because what mindfulness and meditation do from a neuroscience perspective is it helps you source that feeling of safety from within,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's literally what it does. It helps to calm the parts of your nervous system and your brain, and other parts of the body, because everything's connected. Those are just kind of the two that most people sort of talk about when they talk about the science behind mindfulness and meditation. But it helps you navigate the physical feelings of unsafety, because when
Mm-hmm.
when you're unsafe, there are things that are happening in the body when you feel unsafe, whether it's real or perceived, because the
Yeah.
brain doesn't know the difference. That's the thing people need to understand. When you feel a strong sense of unsafety, like what you just described as the feeling of unsafety from the election and even prior to the election, um, if you probably feel like as if you're being chased by a lion or chased by a predator, right? Or whatever, like whatever kind of comes to you for what unsafety means in a physical form. The brain doesn't really know the difference. The brain doesn't know if you're being chased by a lion or if you're having fears, as it relates to political concerns in the world. So therefore the brain is just going to shoot, it's going to do what it does, right? It's going to do what it does. It's going to activate your amygdala. It's going to put your nervous system into sympathetic mode. It's going to shoot off different hormones that put you in fight, flight, freeze. And we all have the power to move that energy to a different direction. We all have the power to activate less cortisol, to send our neural our central nervous system from fight, flight, freeze into rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. Like we have that power. And so it's hard, sometimes it's hard talking about this though, because people, how do I say this without like sounding offensive? People get sort of maybe annoyed at being told that you have the power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it can feel sometimes cliche. It can feel like, oh, the power within, or just search inside. And like, there's all these like phrases that come up, organizations that have called their business to search inside yourself and all these different things. It's true. Like,
Yeah.
as I mean, there's a reason, right? Like why all these organizations are pulling from ancient philosophy, Sufism and Buddhism and Hinduism and African spirituality, all of which says the same thing. Like the Bible, even Christianity, like they all say the same thing, that the power lies within. And it's not cliche, and we have to figure out how to get out of thinking it's cliche and getting into the idea that it is absolutely very much true. And it doesn't change the stuff happening in the physical world around us. It doesn't change how crappy those things are, and how there are so many people that are making choices that are, ruining the planet and
Mm-hmm.
disrupting justice and infringing upon rights and all these other things. Like those things are very much real as well. And those of us that choose to fight it and be sacred rebels, we can't do that effectively while we're in our amygdala
Yeah.
state of brain. We
That's
can't.
exactly it.
I can't stress this enough to all the healers that are listening to this video. You are more effective when your brain and your nervous system functions a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not when you're stuck in fear. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I said, like, channel that, use it almost like treat it as gasoline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like now, okay, you activated the fuel, you activated the emotion, you're activating all these experiences that can lead to powerful intuition and powerful mystical experiences. And there's a real side to that too, where you can activate your prefrontal cortex, your decision-making part of your brain. So now you're not just being mad about the election, you're creating offerings for your community to
Mm-hmm.
support them and to activate people and to catalyze people. And if you're on the front lines of social justice, you're meditating and looking at your astrology and creating programs and getting funding and doing all the things in the real world that leverage change. And so that, because we can't just let them have all the power. We can't let those that want to destroy this planet be the ones in their prefrontal cortex and in their powerful decision making and doing all these things that generate lots of capital and lots of resources. And then we're just sitting here sad and crying, not
Mm-hmm.
doing anything. That's not how you change the world.
Oh, I just got such big chills when you like were channeling for a second from a different place there.
Probably.
You were. I loved it. And I think that's the point. Like I think uh, sometimes yeah, that kind of notion of sourcing from within, it's within can feel cliche, but sometimes to me it
Mhm.
has in certain ways felt dismissive. But
Okay, that's fair.
what you just added is like because I think when it feels dismissive is when it's like shut everything out around you in perpetuity so that you can be okay because you can
Yeah,
source from within. What you're saying,
right.
and this is what I resonate with as well, is shut everything out while you need to, if you need to, so that you can source within, find and establish safety within, so that you can be recharged and re-nourished to go out and change
That's right.
what's messed up around us. Like,
Yep.
and that's my biggest gripe with a lot of the spiritual cliche. To be honest, I see
Yeah.
it as like largely white women manifestation BS these days
Mhm.
that's so popular. That's like just focus on your peace because that's all that you can control and that's all that matters, and like only use it for yourself. Like we're fostering a sense
Yeah.
of internal peace and safety and groundedness so that we can be on the front lines, healing, helping people remember who they are, inspiring, teaching, sharing, even if it's none of those things, just sharing our weird selves, you know?
Yep. Yep. No, and the reality is like, I don't know why we think that we're supposed to be at peace all the time.
Right? Like that's not human.
That's not being a human. That's called being a robot. Like that's called like that's you could write an AI program for that,
Yeah.
right? Like you
Yeah.
could build a robot that's peaceful all the time. Like it's be like a little humorous. Like men that get mail order brides, they're doing that because they want a wife that's just gonna do what they tell them to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the time because they're so focused on peace. Like you don't get like the way it works. I like Dr. Joe Dispenza, who is a thought leader in the space of like mindfulness, meditation, manifestation, so on and so forth. And I love how he puts this that the stronger the emotion, the stronger the manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the if you're just at peace, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but to me, like I interpret that as like that's not strong emotion. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's that's like homeostasis or just like we're just
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
evenness, right? Like that's a goal, right? Like we need that, not to be dismissive of peace, but when you go to church, I'm thinking of like the black church specifically, it's not peaceful. The
Mm-hmm.
black church is not peaceful. It's loud. There's people dancing. There's people shouting. Incantation,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah.
is the experience. It's embodiment. It's people catching what we call the Holy Ghost and like passing out, and it's real. Like I
Yeah.
remember once when I was a little girl, my cousin who she's probably like 10 years, like maybe 8 years older than me. But she was still a child at the time too. So if I'm like 8, let's say she's like 15, right? And I never forget, she was sitting next to me, and she was at the time like not a spiritual person. She wasn't someone that, like read the Bible and all that kind of thing. But I'll never forget, out of nowhere, she caught what we call the Holy Ghost, where she just started like shaking and convulsing. And I remember like, wow, Tracy got the Holy Ghost. Like, I never really seen anybody I knew. It's
Wow.
usually everybody else. Like, I never seen anybody that actually knew catch the Holy Ghost. Like, wow. Right. And it was so real. It was so authentic. It's a memory that I'll never forget. And it was not peaceful, right? Like I say all that to say
Yeah.
to tie it back to my original point, it was not peaceful. It actually looked scary. It looked like, is she okay? Like that's why you have people that come and fan you and give you water and give you tissue because it's like opposite of a peaceful experience. So like this idea that we're supposed to be peaceful all the time, in my opinion, is actually blocking a lot of manifestation.
Yes, I agree.
Because you're choosing, and because I mean, keep it real, feels comfortable.
Hmm.
Right? Peace is comfortable. It's a reflection of, it's usually like when people typically say that, they're probably in survival mode because they've lived in environments that have been so unpeaceful, that have been violent
Yeah.
or dangerous or filled with shame and terror and all these other things. And so, rightfully so, if you seek peace, from those types of environments, absolutely get to that and listen to music that's peaceful and all these things. But I'm finding that, especially when it comes to movement, embodiment, incantation type practices, actually doing it to music that is hip hop,
Yep.
R&B, soul, gospel. It's not music that's kind of stereotypically peaceful. It's music that's meant to awaken me and to
Yes.
enliven me, right? And so I think that again, there's this perspective shift that I'm glad we're moving into as we usher ourselves into this new earth. That peace is important, but it's not everything.
Yeah.
Like, and the last thing I'll say about this, because this comes up in conversations about romantic relationships a lot, right? You ask men and women, especially men and women that have been in or that have experienced like negative, components of relationship. Maybe they've been divorced, maybe they've gotten out of bad relationships. And oftentimes, especially when you ask men, what are you seeking? And the very first thing they say is peace, right? And I get it. I totally get it. But what I tend to see happens as a result of that belief system is that all you end up doing is running away from all the problems that
Yeah.
come with relationships because they're complex by design
Yep.
and they're not always going to be peaceful. So if your number one goal is peace, then you'll get that, which is you'll be by yourself.
Mm.
Because you
And
won't
then
have a partner.
you
Yeah.
won't even
Go
still
ahead.
probably be at peace because
And
there's
because you'll be
internal
wanting.
wars going on within you. But I agree, like
Exactly.
peace is an important component of our emotional complexity. And like the word real really stood out to me that you used. Like that is kind of the equivalent of authenticity, is like this
Yep.
doesn't feel real to me. It feels like a superficial, almost controlling, manipulative attempt at keeping peace because we have to keep so much else out that is not peace. Like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I really agree with that. And I agree with you too that, like, I actually, this is the thing that I think is one of the center roots of all of our problems in the world is that we have become these very wooden, mechanical, uh,
Hmm.
monotonous, afraid
Yep.
of emotion, afraid of expression, afraid of aliveness type of humanity. Not all of us and not all the time, but in general, like that's what it feels like. It feels like we're scared to not only let our full selves be seen, but we don't we're scared to express at all because I think we fear emotion. And part of what you're
Hmm.
talking about, like that's what I think awakening is. It's not just about like learning conspiracy theory type information and waking up to whatever. It's
Hmm.
like feeling fully, being
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. And I think too, like people are really afraid of judgment.
Yeah.
They're afraid of judgment, shame, like use that word earlier in this conversation. Those are the two that really stand out to me because they're the things that often keep me from
Yeah.
showing up as my full self, right? Like I remember when I first started speaking, and I had a speaking coach like tell me, like, you need to turn your volume on and up, right? You need to like amplify yourself. Because I can be a very calm, like I feel very safe here. So I'm probably a bit more animated. But so my like kind of go to is actually more calm, chill,
Hmm.
cool. Like I prefer that because that is generally more acceptable. Like I don't get as much negative feedback. When I'm
Yeah.
in those states versus when I choose to be a bit more amplified. Now people are like, "Oh, what are you doing? Oh, you sure? You sure got a lot of energy today?" Or, "Oh, what did you do?" And so I'm now at a point where I don't care as much, like because it's a part of my job. Like this is if I don't practice this in my life, then I'm not going to be as effective at it in my job on the stage. And if I really want to impact people, that's why I turn my volume up, not to get more money or to get more
Yeah.
attention or to get likes and reviews. It's because I want to have an impact. And that's what the stage is for. The stage is for you to be as big as you can be, even these stages in these virtual spaces,
Hmm.
so that we can have impact on people. But in order to do that, like, and again, that's no matter what your gift is. Like if you're a writer, if you're someone that works in technology, like whatever it is, like we have to really relax our fear of judgment, because most of the time it's just not warranted. Like I think most of
Yeah.
the things that we worry about in this life, or a large number, I won't say most, but I think there is a portion, right? I think we could all agree that there is a portion of our fear that is rooted in unnecessary judgment. And the more we like really challenge that, by getting in safe spaces where we can be just free, without
Hmm.
judgment. I find that when I show up in those non-contained spaces, I feel safer.
Yeah.
And I just don't care as much. Like I literally don't care as much. And because my prefrontal cortex is now popping, and I have the right response to that, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember my cousin told me one time, she was like, "You sure do a lot." And I said, "I don't do a lot. I do what I'm capable of. Maybe you should do more."
Well, that goes back to the sourcing internal safety. Like, if you
Yeah.
are so constantly afraid of judgment from others, um, which is a normal thing, most of us are
Yeah.
afraid of that on at a lot of different levels. But like, if you're so afraid of it that
Hmm.
like that actually kind of, whether you realize it or not, rules your life, and I think for most of us it
Yeah.
has without knowing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
because you're so afraid of like what will
Mm.
happen if someone does judge you. But then once you start building the internal safety, you're like, well, they can judge me and I still know who the fuck I am. And I still got my back
That's
and
right.
I
Yeah.
still got this space. I still got my friends here. Like, I'm good. So, anyways, all
Yeah.
right.
I love
Well,
that. What you said too. I just want to say this, don't let shame and judgment ruin your life. That's a very powerful statement.
ruin and run your life. Like,
And run. Yes,
yeah, for a
ruin and
lot of
run your
people,
life.
it's running their lives and we don't realize it. I mean, still, for myself, I think that's true in a lot of ways. And I think the mindfulness awareness game is like constantly coming back to that, to where you notice when you're contracting and playing small and holding yourself back, or like shutting down those impulses that are telling you to roll like a log or speak up and use your voice or whatever it is in the moment, um, that's needed. So, all right, I think we have covered so much. I love these conversations because, we were not, we didn't have any agenda. We didn't know where it was going to go, but we ended up talking about so much as usual.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
for being here and for sharing a lot of your experiences, your thoughts, and just your energy and your perspective.
Mm.
I think people are going
Yeah.
to really resonate with a lot of what we talked about and what you shared and get a lot out of it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for creating this space for people to feel seen, in their fullness. And I think if I could just ask you one last question before we close out, from an astrological perspective, what gives you hope?
Ooh, it's so funny you ask that, because also as an undercurrent today and through our whole conversation, I've also been feeling this strong pull to the 2025 astrology, because I've also been working in it all day. I've started doing my year ahead readings, and in my brain I'm in 2025.
Mhm.
From an astrological perspective, 2025, I mean, astrologers have been talking about the years like 2020 to 2030 for a long time, but 2025, so much changes.
Mm.
Literally, Pluto in a couple weeks changes signs. Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter, the North and South Node all change signs in 2025. And
Mm.
that to me feels like no matter what, things are going to change. We
Mhm.
can't necessarily predict how they'll change or even if it'll be for better or worse, but to me it feels like there are, especially when I'm in my highest mind like I am after talking with you, there's unlimited potential. It feels very quantum to me, like there's so much potential for
Mm.
change that it could go in any direction. And what also gives me hope is like so much of what we've talked about and what you've shared in this conversation applies to that, of like more and more people are shifting in whatever ways they can from the stuckness and fear and heavier emotions, but like getting stuck in them to
Mm.
moving through them and opening up into other possibilities. And when many of us are doing that individually and collectively, like the timelines can't help but shift with us.
Mm. Yeah, I
And
love that.
that actually, I want to ask you, I have two more last questions for you, but
Mhm.
for you, one of the things I was really curious about is, you talk about kind of creating more and more of your dream life. And for 2025 specifically, as we wrap up this year and start to head into the new year, what are, like, kind of from a high level view, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, I love your response, by the way, and that your response just gave me hope.
Good.
Um, but 2025 is a year of nine.
Mm,
And my life path is nine. I'm really into astrology. So for me, that represents like this is the year that I feel like a lot of the groundwork that I've been laying, because the last 4 years have felt very heavy. I mean, they've been very enlightening and lots of cool experiences, but it has felt like I'm digging the hole and planting
yeah.
the flowers and fertilize a lot of fertilizer. Lots of fertilizer. um, and like when I zoom out, 2025 feels like, okay, we're going to be growing a lot of plants and reaping a lot of fruit
Yeah.
and really exercising a lot of creative energy. And when I say exercising, I mean putting it into the universe,
Mhm.
whether that is writing, community experiences, talks. And I've told you this before, but the work that I do it in corporate spaces. And so I sometimes think that I have to package it a certain way in order for them to receive it. But I really see 2025 being a year that I will prove to myself that it doesn't have to be as packaged as I think it
Mhm.
needs to be. And my intuition, I need to just let my intuition guide that, not my thinking mind, because the intuition is going to be a combination of both. And so when it's necessary for me to use words like peak performance and improving retention, which are important, right? So if you're a good organization, you want your people to be happy, you want them to be there, you want them to deliver great results. But and in addition to that, there are so many other ways that I want to express this stuff that we're talking about. And so I feel like 2025 is going to be a year where I'm really going to push my own limits and bring and birth things that are cutting edge, that are innovative, that are and more than anything, that are an experience. Like I
Mm,
want people to experience something that leaves an unmistakable mark on their life. And it doesn't have to, like, what you do with it, I don't care. Like I'm not a therapist. I'm not like
mhm.
I'm not the person, I'm not the coach to help you bring your dreams to life. That's not my domain. So what you do with it is your business. But I want you to feel something. I want you to feel a spark that in a way that you've never felt it before. And so I really, really feel called that 2025 is going to give me platforms and opportunities to do just that.
I feel that so much. I feel that for you. I feel that for myself a little bit as well in different ways, but and I think this is a good place to wrap up. Like, I actually, even since last week in the election results, I've been feeling that on and off pretty strongly of like, oh, this is the time we have been in conditioning. Like, I'm a
Hmm.
soccer player. So, like, we had the months leading up to the soccer season kind of sucked because it was all conditioning and it was all fitness
Hmm.
focused and it was all
That
running
part.
and drills. And then you get into game time and you're like, oh, this is the fun part. I feel like we're entering game time. And like
Hmm.
those of us who have been doing the work and been planting the seeds and fertilizing the soil and doing all of that work you said, it's time to reap rewards and like be seen as leaders and like help lead other people through a lot of what we have learned and experienced and grown through. So I feel like you sharing that vision for yourself, I feel it for you. And I feel like you're speaking on behalf of, whether you realize it or not, a big group of us that are ready to like
Mm.
kind of, I don't know, there's some kind of metaphor I want to give it, but like I don't know, we're just up leveling and
Yeah.
leading more.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So, okay, thank you for sharing that. And last thing I want to ask is, in case there are any people who want to work with you in some way, whether coming to a virtual event or in person in Atlanta or hiring you for their corporate
Mhm.
team or whatever, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you. No, you can follow me. You can visit my website, shantayhooks.com, and we'll put all of that in the notes, as well as my social media, Instagram, Shantay.speaks. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So for those that are on LinkedIn, certainly, and I don't really, all the content is pretty much the same. I don't like put content on Instagram. And I'm like, I don't put it on LinkedIn. Like I try to be as authentic as I can. And if you work in corporate spaces, please do share my website and my experiences with your leadership teams, your HR teams. This is the reason. I just want to say this quickly. The reason that I picked corporate to do this work is because most people work, right? Like most people have jobs. And so it's just logically like, how do I reach most people? Well, I can reach them at work and they don't individually have to pay for it, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what stops a lot of people from actually investing in their spiritual growth, their development, their mindset. It's because it can be expensive. And I'm not cheap. You're not cheap, right? Like there's a cost to these services that is a reflection of our value. And so I just feel strategically, I share it through corporate spaces. The big corporations can fund it and deliver, some of this back to the communities that, quite frankly, they have played a role. We've all played a role in where we are in this state of the world, and corporations play a huge role in that. So this is my way of kind of not forcing them, but getting them to really indulge their employees and to help, self-help and services that truly are transformative. So if you work in an organization and you're interested in bringing one of my sessions to your org, let's talk.
Yes, I highly recommend that because um, you also have a your own corporate background, so like you have
I
an
do.
innate understanding of how corporations and organizations work, what they want to see, and I feel like you use that and blend that really well with your own spiritual mindfulness side. And there's a little bit
Mhm.
of kind of like hacking the matrix in there of like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go
Why
on.
else did I have this job? I worked
Yeah.
in 20 years in not even marketing or advertising or like these more creative. I'm a CPA by trade. So I worked in audit, governance, compliance, and risk management for 20 years of my career. And now, what I try to help people understand is that these practices, even investing in Chelsea services to help you understand yourself and in relation to astrology, these are risk management strategies.
Mm,
These are truly risk management strategies for the most important process that exists, which is your life in this planet. And so when we treat these as risk management strategies, developing mindful lifestyle habits, understanding our astrology, understanding ourselves, now we're not just risk managing ourselves, we're risk managing, this planet, and it's effective.
yeah, that's a really cool way of looking at it. All right, well,
Thank you,
thank you
friend.
so much, my friend, for being here and for sharing yourself with us. Yeah, thank you for being you and being here at the
Thank
planet,
you.
on the planet at this time.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much.